guys, welcome to video number 13. Now, video number 13, we're going to be diving a bit further into what fundamental analysis is, as we just mentioned in the last video. Now, you probably already got a fair idea. As I explained, we talk about how it centers itself around news and what's going on in the world, certain releases and bits of information that are coming out throughout the day. Now, fundamental analysis is generally run off of what's called the economic calendar, though you can also you can have multiple news channels going, you can have all sorts going on, but most of what comes into fundamental analysis is derived from what's called the economic calendar, which we've already talked about. Now, a good example of an economic calendar that you can check out is Daily FX's calendar. So if you just go to www.dailyfx.com and find the economic calendar on there, that'll give you a good idea of what I'm actually talking about so you can see it for yourself. Now, the economic calendar starts obviously at the beginning of the day, runs to the end of the day, and has a wide variety of releases for different countries around the world. And obviously certain releases for certain countries come out at certain times of the day based on when their session starts, when their market opens, because obviously they all open at different times of the day. Now, certain releases that are quite high importance, I guess you could say, for example, would be ones such as releases regarding the gross domestic product. So for example, GDP for a particular quarter or year on year, releases about consumer confidence, releases about interest rate changes, releases about mortgage applications and anything like that. Those kinds of releases tend to have the most weight and will tend to influence currencies the most out of all of them. Now, when you look on this economic calendar, you will notice that they are generally divided into three different types of releases: low importance, which is generally blue; medium importance, which is orange; and high importance, which is red. Now, generally the way it works is that the ones with the higher importance tend to have more of an effect on the currency. So for example, if there's a high importance release coming up, you generally want to keep an eye on that because that could affect the currency quite a lot. Generally mediums have a fair bit of effect, but not as much as high importances, and the lows generally, like motorbike sales and other releases like that, generally are low importance. But don't think that that's always the case, because I have seen high importance releases that have done almost nothing, and I've seen medium importance and even low importance releases that have caused a lot of disruption to a currency. So essentially what you're looking for as you scroll through the economic calendar every morning, which is a good habit to do anyway, so you know what's coming up just in case you don't want to get caught out on something. And what you're looking for is you're looking for any releases throughout the day that are scheduled that relate to any currencies that you're going to be trading. So if you're set on trading currency pairs that have the US dollar in them, then take a look throughout the schedule for that day and have a look to see if there are going to be any US dollar releases. They're generally towards the end of the day if you're here in Australia due to the time difference. But once you know the different sessions and when everything opens, then you can figure out sort of what time of the day to look for them. So back to the example before, you're trading the US dollar versus other things, or other things versus the US dollar. You want to look for all the US dollar releases that are going to be scheduled for that day. The ones that are high importance and medium importance generally are the ones you want to watch out for. So if there's a high importance one coming up and it's scheduled for say 10 o'clock your time, well, unless you've got a fair idea of what's going to happen and how it's going to influence it, you might want to steer clear of it, because it could skyrocket in a different direction if you don't understand what you're reading. Now, under each release, you're going to, generally speaking, unless it's a speech which has no figures next to it, you're going to see three figures. You're going to see previous result, the forecast result, and the actual result. Now, the previous, for example, if we were looking at an inflation release, for instance, the previous result might have been, say, negative 0.7% might have been the previous rate of inflation. So that'll be negative 0.07, negative 0.7 will be the previous. The forecast, now they might be forecasting in increase in the inflation up to, say, 1%. Now, therefore, the forecast would say 1.0. So that's what they're expecting it to be. Now, that gives you a bit of an idea, so that when the actual release comes out, the actual line, so you've got 3 lines, previous, forecast, and actual. There'll be no number or figure in the actual until the release comes out. Now, that release, usually most of the time, is pretty much bang on what they forecasted. However, it can differ. It can be higher, it can be lower. So don't just expect that forecast is always going to be right. And essentially, if we were looking at that scenario, and it was for, say, the US dollar, and the US dollar's inflation was about to go from negative 0.7 up to 1%, and it actually did hit that, and in the actual it did say 1.0%, that would generally have a negative bearing on the US dollar. So that would cause the US dollar, generically speaking, to weaken. So if you had a buy order, say, US dollar against the Japanese yen, at the time, you might sting a little bit, because it would generally cause it to duck. Usually temporarily, they don't keep going and going and going in that direction, but it will cause a temporary fluctuation. So you just got to be aware of that, and understand how certain releases affect certain currencies. That's basically the gist of fundamental analysis, using the news from around the world, and also keeping an eye on certain things that aren't in the releases on the economic calendar. For example, any major events. For example, if there was a major event in a certain country, let's say a natural disaster that affected a large portion of a certain country, or affected a capital city, for example, a major earthquake in a capital city, that could cause their currency to weaken as confidence is lost, and therefore sell-offs start to happen. So there's a whole bunch of different things which can happen. So you have to sort of keep your finger on the pulse a bit and know what's going on around the world. And that's essentially fundamental analysis in a nutshell. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.